Okay, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the July meeting of the Executive. We've got special guests watching us today. We've got some members of Stretford WI who've come to see how an exec meeting works, and then I'll take them on a quick tour of the town hall after we finish this evening. Conscious that the last time a Labour politician was in the audience or had an audience of WI people, it didn't end that well. So I'm hoping I don't get slow hand clapped by you this evening. But you're most welcome. Welcome to Trafford Council. In terms of attendance, we've got apologies from Councillor James Wright. Has anyone else got apologies to offer?
Apologies have been received from Councillor Carter.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. Are there any declarations of interest? Okay, if we move on to item 3, which is the minutes, are we happy to accept and approve the minutes from last time, I propose? Well supported, thank you very much. Now, moving on to section 4, we have got several questions from the public this time. And what I'm going to do is pass over to our monitoring officer for the evening, Emma Malpas, who will read each question and then the relevant exec member will respond. So Emma, I'll pass on to you for the first question.
Thank you, Leader. A number of questions have been received from the public for this evening's meeting. To ensure that all questions can be answered within the allotted time, I will be summarising the key elements of each question. Each question in full will, however, be set out and published within the minutes following this meeting. The first 3 questions are from Eleanor Horner. Question number 1, with reference to agenda item number 8, are the Gorsey Lane and/or the Dunham Road schemes referred to in paragraph 3.4 the same as the scheme that was approved on 12th October 2022? Question number 2, have there been any significant design amendments to the scheme as set out in the report that was approved in October? And question number 3, please confirm that the scheme was approved in October is fully funded and proceeding to delivery in autumn 2023 and not being delayed in the reprioritisation of MCF funded schemes.
Thank you, Emma. If I pass on to Councillor Aidan Williams to respond.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Ms Horner for submitting her questions. I'll turn through them as we receive them. In respect of the Gorsey Lane and Dunham Road scheme referred to in paragraph 3.4 of the report, I can confirm that it is the same scheme that was approved on the 12th of October 2022. In regard to whether or not there are any significant changes to that scheme, I can confirm that there's no significant changes. The designs have been refined in terms of technical aspects such as road safety audits, drainage and tree placements, but we wouldn't consider that there have been any significant changes. And in respect of whether or not it's this scheme that was approved in October is fully funded and proceeding to delivery in autumn 2023, I can confirm that it is fully funded. It sits within TFGM. And in this instance, the delivery partner is TFGM, it isn't Trafford Council. And they'll be looking to appoint a contractor towards the end of August 2023 with works to start thereafter. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. If we move on now to the next questions. Thank you, Emma.
The next question is from Andrew Gould. This relates to the Urmston Active Neighbourhood section of agenda item number 8. Mr Gould expresses concerns relating to measures being implemented that will restrict resident access. He is unclear of what the scheme seeks to achieve and identifies that it may result in increased traffic activity around Canterbury Road and the children's playground in the immediate vicinity. Mr Gould is against plans for the scheme continuing and asks, will the portion of Route D around Canterbury Road now be excluded from Urmston Active Neighbourhood permanently?
Thank you. Now pass back to Councillor Aidan Williams to respond.
Thank you, Chair. The Council first consulted a range of stakeholders and proposals to introduce more active travel measures for the Urmston Active Neighbourhood Scheme in 2020 as part of a Mayoral Challenge Fund application. Consultation was met with a high degree of interest, with over 3,400 comments received and 600 individuals attending drop-in sessions. The outcome of that consultation can still be found online. The consultation identified safety, car driving, parking, traffic congestion around schools and dangerous rat runs through residential areas as some of the key issues for those stakeholders. Resident feedback also formed a key part of the development of the plans being taken forward. Conceptual designs for Ilmston Active Neighbourhood were presented to Trafford Council, to the M41 area ward councillors and to Transport for Greater Manchester in 2022. The designs were split into several phases of the scheme, beginning with interventions along 8 potential minor or major routes that cover the whole of M41 area. Phase 1 comprises Route C, Flixton West, and Route D, Davyhune Park, including the Canterbury Road estate. They've been identified as areas for further engagement and consultation, which is planned for in autumn 2023. In addition to that consultation, the intention is to include an option of trialling various interventions post the consultation. There'll be further information released as that consultation comes to the fore. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. And Emma, if we go on to the next set of questions, thank you.
There are 3 questions from Friends of John Lee Park. The first question relates to usage, and these are all with reference to agenda item number 7. What utilisation rate is expected for the pilot, and what proportion of these are expected to be charged? Question number 2 relates to outreach. Why have we not seen a full description of a typical outreach programme, and who are the courses for? And the third question is in relation to examples and asks, where is this programme working? What are the numbers? What is the outreach, utilisation and charging structure?
Thank you very much. If I pass now to Councillor Kath Hines to respond.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Emma, for articulating those questions. And I'd also like to thank the Friends of John Lee Park for their questions. So they've raised 3 areas of concern where they feel that their meeting with council officers on the 18th of July to discuss the pilot proposals didn't fully kind of cover their questions. And I do understand that John Lee Park doesn't wish to be part of the pilot scheme, and this is reflected in the proposal. However, they have suggested that this further explanation would benefit those parks who have opted to be involved in the local pilot. So in terms of the usage, many of the issues that have been raised regarding usage levels and income will be developed as we work over the next 2 years with local communities to shape the local programme and collect data or usage on usage and income generated for each pilot scheme. Understanding these factors and determining what works for our communities are really important elements of the pilot, which is why we haven't yet provided that detailed breakdown of income, usage and charges. However, current booking data has been considered and referenced in the report, as it shows Trafford residents and tennis players are willing and able to use the booking system. We've been working closely with the Lawn Tennis Association, the national governing body, and they're very supportive of the local pilots to test all elements of the approach and consider how the outreach programmes can best reflect the varying community needs in each locality. The Lawn Tennis Association have advised that a park court typically needs a collective maintenance and sinking fund of £1,500 per year. The revenue model developed for the pilot responds to this with a flexible model that can balance free bookable access, coaching and outreach and paid for slots. Demand data supports the pilots and suggests there is considerable latent demand for tennis in the borough. The demand data covers all of Trafford and covers all ages within a 0 to 20 minute drive to courts. We'll continue to draw on the Lawn Tennis Association's expertise and the learning gained as they roll out the national programme across Greater Manchester and wider. In terms of outreach, providers will be asked to tender for the local provision. Providers will be expected to connect and collaborate with local schools and clubs to ensure a pathway and provide a range of sessions across all age groups, abilities and at varying varying times and costs to meet community needs while generating required income levels. In terms of examples, as this is a national scheme, it is early days in the rollout programme. However, working closely with Manchester City Council and Bury Council, we've been able to draw on the learning from case studies, both report usage levels of 50 to 60% per week. Manchester City Council has a scheme with over 19,000 users and have demonstrated that sites with access gates have more bookings than those that don't, and that these have increased on a monthly basis from April 23. They've also engaged a provider across a range of parks who deliver junior, adult and family sessions at all levels with varying charging packages in place. This is delivered alongside a rolling programme of court upgrades, including installing lockable gates and introducing charges for courts hire. We will continue to work with the Lawn Tennis Association and colleagues within Greater Manchester and beyond to learn from their experiences, good and bad. And we look forward to bringing that learning back to share with the Friends of Parks and to feed into the Trafford pilots. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hines. And I think we've got one final question. Thank you, Emma.
Yes, this is another question from Andrew Gould. It relates to the tennis improvement programme at agenda item number 7. Park Friends groups across Trafford have been engaged with the tennis improvement programme for some time. Most parks have deep misgivings about plans to charge a fee to access any part of a public park. The idea of charging has been rejected by 80% of those who responded to the consultation. What level of disapproval would it take for council officers to recommend something more acceptable?
Thank you, Emma. I'll pass back to Councillor Hines to respond.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Emma, again for the question, and thank you, Andrew, for his correspondence. The points that he's raised and for the specific question in relation to the consultation. The Friends of Parks groups across Trafford have been involved in the project for some time. Their opinions on each site and local insights have been invaluable, and we will continue to work with the Friends of Parks groups as we progress with the pilots in each community. We've also worked, as I was just saying in response to the previous question, with the Lawn Tennis Association in bringing together the level of investment required to improve park courts across the borough. As is detailed in the report, the level of funding required of £587,000 to bring our courts up to an acceptable standard, and ongoing maintenance of £46,500 per annum is sadly not one that the council could meet given the current level of budget pressures. This proposal provides a significant opportunity to work closely with the local residents alongside Tennis's national governing body to learn from their experiences and that of other local authorities and communities as we pilot this approach together. In relation to Andrew's question to the executive on consultation and charging, we do acknowledge that not all elements of the scheme were fully supported through the borough-wide public consultation process, particularly on charging. Equally, though, some elements of the scheme were supported and the levels of support for each element varied from location to location, as did the level of charging that people thought acceptable. Therefore, the idea is to work out a fair and accessible structure that will not prevent anyone from being able to play tennis. How we do that is exactly what we hope to test in our local pilots. We accept that the borough-wide public consultation process was somewhat limited in its reach. By piloting the approach in local communities, we're seeking to engage families, young people, local schools and clubs to gauge their opinions, taking a focused community, place-based approach. These local voices were not captured in the broader borough-wide consultation process to date. At the end of the pilot, we will carefully consider the learning and available options to determine the best offer for all our residents. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hines, and thank you again, Emma, for asking all those questions. I believe that's the end of the questions from the public. If we move on now to any matters from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Councillor Acton.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, we had our first meeting of scrutiny for this municipal year, where we actually look at priority of items to scrutinise throughout the municipal year. What I want to say is that the main ones that we wanted to have a good look at were accessibility of council services, to actually see how easy Trafford residents find it to contact the council online and through email or phone to access the services. And I think that is a really important subject to look at in detail. The next one is damp and mould within rented accommodation. And I think, we will be inviting the housing associations to actually look at how they are tackling damp and mould within their, properties. And again, we felt that this was a really important issue for residents living in housing association properties. And I think that's reflected in, all members, as we heard at the council meeting last week. But whilst we're inviting the housing association officers, we will also be asking them about how they will work with the council to reduce carbon emissions by retrofitting homes. Again, that is something that we, I think all of us would support. And the last thing that we want to question them on is how L&Q plan to work with the council now that they have been taken over by Trafford Housing Trust. Again, I think an important issue. So they're the priority ones, and it's alongside the existing task and finish groups that we started last year around Man United and how the community and Man United can actually come together in a better space. And reducing car dependency, that's another one for, that is actually operating at this moment, the task and finish group, and that will continue through the year. So that's it for me, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Acton. I think they're very important priorities to have for the year ahead. I think the accessibility of council services, it's a basic, and so any insight that you can bring as to how we might get that better would be most welcome. Likewise, we had a very extensive, very good discussion at council last week about the damp and mould in properties, and the work that you can do in that area would be most welcome, and also the ongoing partnership we have with L&Q. Any attention you can bring to that is most welcome as well. So it sounds like a very busy year for core committee, and I know that as an executive we're very keen to continue working with you and the committee members. Councillor Butt, do you have anything to say from the Health Scrutiny Committee?
Thanks, Chair. We're having our meeting on Wednesday, our first one, but we are going to continue with some of the main topics from last year, which we are and the reports will be concluding on, and there are some very interesting further subjects that are in the pipeline, of particular interest to local Trafford residents. So we'll hopefully report to you on the next occasion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Butt. We look forward to that and the work programme that you have in place there. Okay, if we move on then to the business, so we go to item 6, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Councillor Kath Hines, who will give us an update on our culture strategy.
Thank you, Leader. And it is also my great pleasure to bring these exciting proposals for Trafford's cultural strategy to the executive this evening. I don't know how many of us were already aware. It's something that I wasn't already aware, that Trafford is actually a talent belt for culture and the arts across Greater Manchester, with 25% of creative professionals living in the borough. The creative industries provide 7,000 jobs, which is 4.7% of all employment in the borough. This compares to 2.2% in the Northwest and 2.3% for Great Britain. And this isn't currently recognised at a Greater Manchester level, where Trafford is valued more as an audience for Manchester's culture and creative sector rather than the workforce or the lifeblood. Also, Trafford is underrepresented in terms of external funding for culture and the arts, with no Trafford-based organisation being supported by the Combined Authority Culture Fund or by the Arts Council's national programme. So this strategy will build on the Combined Authority's culture strategy, which is grown in Greater Manchester, known around the world, to ensure that Trafford is fairly represented in the cultural sector across the region. Having the Trafford culture strategy will bring hugely significant benefits, which are documented in the report, which details the positive impacts the strategy will have for our residents and for visitors, creating a greater sense of place identity within Trafford, increased investment into the borough, and benefits for the nighttime economy. The aim is to bring together the rich and diverse cultural assets we have within the borough, from large independent organisations like the Imperial War Museum and Dunham Massey, or our big sporting arenas like Lancashire Cricket Club and Man United, to our smaller and magnificent community groups and council-run services like the Waterside, Gorse Hill Studios, OT Creative, and many more. As set out in the report, the strategy recognises the importance of local resources, local traditions and customs, and looks to promote these further to improve the borough's image and pride in place. The development of this strategy has been a journey, commissioning support from CTC, and there's been extensive research and engagement via one-to-one conversations, small group sessions, workshops, and a cultural summit in June, which was attended by a broad range of stakeholders, community groups, corporate organisations, creatives and artists. And I was really lucky actually to have been able to attend that culture summit. And I have to say there was a real buzz in the room as the organisations fed into the strategy, but also made real tangible links with each other in how to support each other. It is really important that both the vision and aims of this strategy do reflect that culture in Trafford should be inclusive for everyone. The report contains 19 recommendations, which are grouped under 3 inclusive, community and grassroots-led strategic aims. These can be found at section 2 of the report, together with the full vision and aims for the strategy. The full strategy can be found at Appendix 1. The implementation plan and recommendations are also set out in the report, highlighting the iterative steps that we will be taking to implement the strategy in 3 areas, which is the immediate activity that will build on the work started during the strategy development, a plan to recruit to a temporary cultural transformation role, which will really drive the work forward, and outline the plan to create, embed and grow Trafford's cultural network, which is described as the hub and spoke model, where the Waterside is the hub. Service review of cultural teams to ensure they are in the strongest position possible to embrace and model the vision and aims of the strategy. The plan requires financial resource of up to 180,000 over 2 years, and the executive is asked to adopt and approve the Trafford cultural strategy and approve the implementation plan and commit the associated resources. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Hines. I mean, I'm so excited about getting to this stage with this strategy. Anyone who knows me knows how much I feel culture and our culture offer is important for all of us in the borough, no matter what your background. If we just pause for a moment and think about some of the things that do happen in this borough. So, for instance, we have our very own Waterside Arts, which has a diverse programme of activities throughout the year. The national venue, Imperial War Museum North, which is going strong on the Wharf side. We've got Inch Arts in Altrincham. We've got Gores Hill Studios, as Councillor Hines mentions. We've got Sale Festival, which is a thriving arts-based event that happens every year. We've got Altrincham Garrick, a historic theatre there that keeps putting on some fantastic productions that are very well attended. We've got our Oscar winners, McKinnon and Saunders, who won an Oscar earlier this year. And both Councillor Hines and I learnt the other week when we visited that we have one of the largest collections of puppets in the country here in Trafford, but we've just not yet done anything with that, but we're determined to do something with that, aren't we, Councillor Hines? We've got a thriving music service, and we've got international venues such as Lancashire County Cricket Club and Manchester United Football Club as well. So there is so much there. And then when you consider the number of people that work in the creative sector that live in the borough as well, there is so much more we can do, not just to celebrate the things that we have in place already, but using this model to support areas where we may have gaps in our cultural offer, where we maybe should be doing more to support local communities with arts, culture and access. So there's a lot to go at. And so I'm very, very pleased that we've reached this stage this evening. Do any members of the executive have any? Councillor Williams.
Thanks, Chairman. I won't speak at length. I just wanted to compliment your point, really. I think what I value from this piece of work is that there's a real understanding of culture in its broadest possible sense. So when you refer to, I suppose, the arts, one might expect that, but to consider as well our sporting offer, to consider that Trafford's got a really thriving food and beverage offer, that it's now a borough where people want to come to relax, not just to live, and that we've got people coming from outside of Trafford to visit our offer, I think is really welcome. I'd like to just pay credit really to the consultants that have worked with us on this piece of work, because they provided us an extremely robust report there, and they've gone into a really great extent of detail about what next steps the local authority can take to drive this forward. I think this is a really long overdue piece of work, and I really welcome that the administration recognises that there is a role for local government and for the local authority in driving forward and coordinating the cultural offer in Trafford. And I think it's just a sign of good things to come. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for those comments, Councillor Williams. Anyone else from the executive? Okay, if I go to Councillor Evans first of all.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions. One on page 22, the cultural transformation role at £400 a day, £72,800 a year. Surely a good amount of effort to get full time. That's a lot of money. And somebody that was actually in it on a fixed term role, committed to it and could roll with it, I think would be better. I'd like a comment on that. And then moving on to page 23, item 5.4. The intention is that future funding requirements are met from external sources, e.g. Ace Place Partnership. How certain are we of that? Does the whole process rest on that? And what does future mean? Does it mean 1 year, 2 year, 3 year? Oh, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. I'll go to Councillor Hines first, and then I might go to Sarah after that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Evans. I think those two questions are probably linked with each other to a certain degree in my mind, actually. So to your first point and question, that it does seem like a lot, but actually that is the kind of the market rate for somebody who has got that expertise, who's got that kind of cultural expertise, who knows how to drive forward a plan like this. And the idea is, and it's not just an idea actually, you know, and a lot of research has been done around this in equivalent roles in other local authorities, that they will be able to bring all of this together to make these things happen, and to then look at what is the sustainable model going forward, and to put all of those things in place so that actually, you know, that the strategy itself is bringing that kind of income, generating that income to sustain itself. Now, the idea is obviously not to necessarily bring in a kind of an income for the local authority. It's to sustain itself as a cultural strategy. So those two questions, I think, really are linked together, and the linking already, the benefits of even having the conversations can be seen. There were some really tangible examples in the room where the organisations were linking up with each other. They had skills that were mutually kind of beneficial to each other, so they were setting things up already. So even having those conversations, the council was able to kind of to coordinate, is already starting to kind of pay dividends. But there is so much more that this strategy can deliver, and having a person to do that who has got the right skills will be able to take that to the next level. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jerome.
Thank you, Leader. A cultural strategy is something that can make a real difference to this borough, and there is much promise in these documents, and the Green Group will support where we can. However, there is a lot of mystifying jargon in these documents too: hyperlocal community connection, creative factory, and so on. The implementation plan at 4.1 of the report also says this will need to be organic at times. Therefore, not all the actions are known now. It seems to me there is little concrete grasp of what the achievements will exactly look like. Is there a danger this S106 money could be wasted, as it's a massive and complicated undertaking with a lack of definition in places?
Okay, Councillor Hines.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Jerome. I mean, to answer your last question, I would very much hope not. I don't anticipate that will be the case. And as I say, even just having those conversations has started to ignite something that wasn't there before. As my answer to Councillor Evans, I think having that person who's got that expertise to drive that forward will be really beneficial. And a lot of work has gone into this strategy, but the reason that it is organic is because it will and necessarily constantly change to reflect kind of how it will be. It is already dynamic, but it will continue to be dynamic. It gives the flexibility of it, gives scope for more voices to feed into that. And I think local members, yourself included, may well want to feed into that with the local knowledge that you've got as well. So that will be very much appreciated, and we hope that you can all contribute to that. I kind of do agree with you, if I'm being 100% honest, in terms of some of the jargon that's in the body of the main report. When I was writing my summary, I took some of it out because it's not my natural language. So I do agree with you on that, and I think in some ways it sort of it detracts a little bit from the fact that we want this to be accessible for everyone. But I think that is the language that's used there. So I just would ask you to forgive that a little bit. But there is a little bit of that in there. I do agree with that. Thank you.
Just to add to that, CTC, who've supported us through this strategy, they are leaders in their field around this. They are very much embedded in the cultural and creative industries, and have brought a lot of their own wisdom and insight to this process. So I'm not worried about this. I think it will be it will be very good value for money, because what it will do is unlock a whole sector that, as a council, over many decades now we've not really captured and run with. So I think this is a front-loaded investment in resource now, which will unlock a lot of both cultural but also economic benefits to us. So if we get the cultural strategy right, you're going to help employment, you're going to help the food and beverage offer, you're going to help bring more people into our towns. So there is a positive around our economy. So I am optimistic about this. I'm confident about this because we've sought the right advice and they have benchmarked, they've looked at best practice elsewhere, they've looked at what we're not doing, which frankly was quite a lot, and we're looking to put that right now, which is what this strategy will do. Sarah, did you want to?
Yes, just to give Councillor Jerome some comfort that hot off the press, an easy read of the culture has landed in my inbox. So I will easy read it and then circulate, but absolutely accepting the points around jargon.
Thank you. Councillor Butt indicated and then Councillor Ennis. So Councillor Butt first.
I also welcome this strategy. Some years ago, I was on the board of internationalisation and marketing, Greater Manchester, and one of the big efforts that was made on that was to try and exploit all the resources within Greater Manchester. And Trafford always used to come out on top because we were punching above our weight, really, in terms of the assets we've got. And clearly, we're not saying that we haven't utilised them as much as we could do, or met as much benefit from them as we could do. But certainly, if this, has been looking at ways of being able to use all those facilities, because there's an incredible number of associations and societies within Trafford that seem to be forgotten to a certain extent, not because deliberately, but it's just that they don't seem to have any access. I mean, I'm typically thinking of one which just happened to come up, which was U3A, University of the Third Age, and there are several of those organisations within Trafford. And one of them came to me only a few days ago and said, we want to let people know who we are, what we can do, because they do provide for people like people with mental health issues, and inequalities that they might suffer as well, and loneliness, which is another big thing that's increasing now, especially with older people. I mean, I know in the corporate priorities, it doesn't seem to mention things like this sort of loneliness and mental health issues, but which are actually growing all the time. Perhaps at some point they will be looked at. But as I say, we just need to be able to signpost people, those organisations, as to where they can go to get that information, because they just need that extra help, and that will help you as well in terms of getting to know who they are and what they can do for people, not just from within their own locality, but wider afield, within Trafford itself. So I just wanted to say that's good. I think one of the points which perhaps didn't get quite covered earlier on from my colleague was on the funding side. I think there's mention of ACE partnership or something that we'll be doing. Can you possibly just explain who they are?
So that is the Arts Council, Councillor Butt, and we are working very closely with the Arts Council at the moment to understand what bid rounds and funding pots we can access for Trafford Council and also for our stakeholders and strategic partners too.
Okay, thank you. So if I could later on perhaps get to that point of contact for being able to signpost one of these organisations that I've got that wants to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. And Councillor Ennis.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just say, I really, really welcome this body of work. It's a substantial piece of work, and it doesn't happen in a vacuum either, because we have to take into account the decimation of arts funding since 2010. There really has been. It's not an easy place for local government to operate in at all. So look forward to the easy read, and it looks substantial. But just maybe if I could get some assurances around two pillars of this, as I'm looking at it. We need to see that there's work being done in every corner of the borough, and that outreach is true and all-encompassing. And the two pillars I'm talking about really are the nighttime economy and education and outreach, because that's how you create a circular economy around the arts. And if we could just talk a little bit more about the implementation with regards to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ennis. Councillor Hines.
Yeah, thank you for that. I am just going to ask Sarah if you can come in terms of, I mean, I would like to offer you that assurance, but just in terms of how we're going to kind of reflect that back and when. Are you able to comment further on that, Sarah?
So I think the honest answer is it's really early stages at the moment as we start to shape the strategy that sits around this, but absolutely they are core pillars of how we deliver culture right across the borough in each and every part, and is linked to the work that's happening in the police part of the organisation. So obviously there needs to be some real connections in that regard, and we are starting to have those conversations with education partners too about how we make sure we underpin the strategy in that area too. But I think it's a watch this space, but watch closely because I don't think it will be far away.
Thank you very much for that, Sarah. Okay, so the recommendations are 1 and 2 as set out at the top of the paper. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next item, which is the tennis investment project, and I'll hand back to Councillor Hines.
Thank you, and apologies that it is still me. I'll give somebody else a chance shortly. So I am really happy actually to present the report to the executive, which is recommending a pilot scheme for improving Trafford's park tennis courts over the next 2 years. And I will talk you through the report, and I think we've had answers to some questions, I think, which has already sort of trailered this report. And it's just to mention really before I do start to talk you through it, that we have been working with the borough's Friends of Parks groups in securing investment for tennis and developing the pilot scheme. But it is important to note that this report was published a little while ago, and when it was published, it was our understanding that Davy Hume Park Friends of Group had wanted to be involved in the pilot, and that was our understanding, but actually that is not the case, and they have confirmed to us that they don't wish to be included in the pilot. So when I talk you through it, I will apologise that Davian Park is listed there, but actually, as it stands, the recommendations for the pilot scheme will be to progress this with Longford, Ashton and Pickering Lodge Parks, with the potential for a fourth, which will be in the west of the borough. So I am pleased to introduce the report, but I do also want to acknowledge at the outset that I do understand why this item has generated some kind of further questions and inquiry from our friends of groups. And I think this is because it does represent some change in our parks. But it is very important to also stress that the proposals that I am presenting this evening are for a pilot scheme. And that's in response to the consultation that we've done. And it's to pilot, hopefully, in one park in each of the 4 localities in Trafford. And that is then to help us to determine the best way forward for tennis in our borough. So we have 31 tennis courts in parks across the borough, which do, I think it's fair to say, vary in terms of quality, with some that really are in quite a poor condition. And sadly, the local authority doesn't have the resource to invest into the courts to bring them up to a high standard, and it doesn't have sufficient funds to then maintain the courts at that level on an ongoing basis. But We do believe it's important to have a sustainable and affordable tennis offer in Trafford. That means tennis can remain accessible to everyone and not just those people who can afford to join a private tennis club. Without some investment, the concern is that the courts may decline and that there will be significantly less access to affordable tennis. The Lawn Tennis Association, who I'll just refer to as the LTA, have got some investment funding available to local authorities for tennis courts. To access the LTA funding, we need to demonstrate a sustainable model of maintenance. This means considering a model for booking the courts and potentially charging a fee for some access. However, the local authority can consider its pricing to ensure that it is accessible, including concessions and options to retain some free access. The council has consulted on a set of options and proposals for a booking and charging scheme that would also have some outreach and coaching available. Consultation and engagement took place with the Friends of Parks groups, also with residents via a citizen space survey, which had 830 responses, and through 2 public meetings. The feedback is set out in section 4 of the report. Feedback was not positive with regards to the introduction of a charge for tennis, with 80% of residents stating that they wouldn't be willing to pay a fee, although some elements of the proposals were more welcome, actually, such as coaching and outreach. In the public meetings, reflections in favour were that people understood the need to develop a sustainable operating model, that they saw the benefit of an operator to reach new audiences, and they understood the need for access gates and would support their peers and children to access the system. Those against the proposal believe that the court should remain free and open for all, saw access gates and a fee as barriers to use that would exclude young people and anyone who couldn't use the booking system. Consider an operator to be too commercial and exclusive. We're concerned about the inclusivity of the engagement process and timing of the process. So, given the feedback, it is really important that we do now consider the options. There are a range of options detailed in the paper, which can be found in sections 5 and 6 of the report, which details the potential strengths, weaknesses and risks of each of those proposals. The recommendation is for us to consider option 3C, which is to introduce a pilot scheme in 4 parks, 1 in each locality, although at the moment we have only got 3 identified for the reasons that I stated a little bit earlier. So the proposal is for an access gate, a charge and an operator. The pilot would operate for an initial 24 months with a quarterly review process that will monitor and analyse key performance indicators such as user numbers, revenue, outreach engagement and user feedback. On conclusion of the pilot, a paper will be submitted again back to executive to detail the impact of the pilot and provide recommendations on next steps. On conclusion, the option to expand the model to other courts can be considered, although the pilot options secure investment for courts across the sites that have been identified. There will obviously be remaining courts that won't have that investment during that pilot phase. But any future rollout of the pilot would require further capital investment, which at this point isn't necessarily guaranteed by the LTA, but we don't know what the situation will be when we get to that point. The responses to the engagement process and consultation have been discussed with the LTA, and we've tried to draw on their experience and options have been set out in the report for what we can do there. So section 7 of the report details some indicative financial modelling, demonstrating that based on a pricing model of £3 per court per hour, with a billable period of approximately 10 hours per day and season operating from May to September, these courts can generate the revenue that's detailed then in the report. So, in summary, enabling residents to access spaces and places to be active does, unfortunately, but obviously come at a cost, which will need to be met and sustained. Without a structured and sustainable plan for the borough's parks, tennis courts, they will sadly deteriorate and become unusable. While the response to the consultation and engagement to date wasn't overwhelmingly positive to all aspects of the model, the recommended pilot scheme enables the council to strike a balance, draw on the implementation experiences for other authorities and expertise of the LTA to test the effectiveness of the model. And the recommendations are set out in the report. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Hines. Does anyone from the executive wish to speak? Councillor Patel.
Thank you. Thank you, Cass, for presenting what has been a very complex piece of work. I know that has been ongoing for many years. So I know pre-COVID we started these discussions, and I'd just like to thank officers, exec members and the LTA for their contributions. I support the proposals in the report as a genuine attempt to find a sustainable future for our tennis courts. Contrary to a lot of sort of talk around the project, this is not a great money-making scheme for the council. This is us looking to generate a modest sink fund to ring fence to individual courts to ensure that we can invest in it in the future. It's the wraparound is a genuine offer to improve access and opportunity to play tennis on a court that meets a decent standard, no more, no less. I was very pleased to join Councillor Harding and Councillor Jerome on a visit to Wythenshawe Park where we saw it in action. That was very useful, and certainly tapping into other local authorities on their experience will be useful moving forward. And I really look forward to seeing these pilots evolve. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patel. Councillor Adshead.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, lots already been said, so obviously I haven't got too much to say, but I'm pleased to know. But obviously, following the consultation, the report has been completely amended, so we are just looking at a pilot now. I think that's probably the correct way to go forward, both because it listens to the consultation, but secondly, it also gives us the opportunity to actually see what the demand is. Now, when you read through the report, it's when these other authorities at Manchester and Bury have done them, they've actually shown quite an increase in take-up of this sport. And I think that's what particularly interests me. If they've made it into a successful scheme, then I think a pilot is the right way forward to see if it's suitable for Trafford as well. Obviously, if it does generate more interest, as you said yourself, unfortunately, it isn't guaranteed that other parks will be able to join because it was like a one-off opportunity, really. And I think that is a shame in some ways, obviously, that we haven't, but obviously the pilot gives us the opportunity to actually see what it is like. And I think also I'm looking forward to see how we can get the youngsters in other areas that perhaps can't afford them as part of this scheme as well, which is set out in parts of the report. I think that'll be really good to do that, because at the moment it is difficult. There's nothing really facilities there. Bringing the LTA might actually bring on some youngsters, which I think is one of the aims of this sort of strategy. It isn't just about people going in there if they can get in there. I mean, when I did pass one of the tennis courts this week, I did see some dogs running around in my own local park, which shall not name, but obviously something like this will actually make sure that it's actually available to people who use it. So I think it's to be welcome, this, and at the end of the pilot, I think I look forward to seeing actually what the take-up is and actually if it's been supported and what our options are. But it's not certain we're going to be able to take it forward in the future. It's just a pilot. So I think I want to emphasise it. But none of this is a done deal at all. We've had some genuine consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adshead. And Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I've only recently been involved in this initiative, but I just wanted to thank the officers for all the research they've put into this. It's obviously been a lot of work, all the research they've put into it, producing this really readable report. concise, but with all the detail that you need. And thank them for all the presentations they've given to us and the Friends of Park groups as well. So just wanted to thank them.
Thank you, and I echo that thanks as well, Councillor Thompson. Any other questions? Councillor Ennis, first of all.
Thank you, Chair. Just maybe on a point of clarity, 3 of the 4 pilot sites have received some positive support for the sustainable operating model. Which site didn't?
So we haven't had any response from Pickering Lodge. Now, we're not necessarily taking the fact that we've had no response as a positive response, but given that they haven't fed back anything of a negative nature, and we have, because we invited them to the feedback once we'd kind of we'd published this report, or we hadn't actually published it, but we were ready to publish it. We invited them to a feedback session to talk it through, as we did with the other Friends of groups, to gauge their reaction, and they weren't in attendance at that either. So we are hoping that we will be able to engage the Friends of Pickering Lodge to kind of bring them into it, but that is who that was. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. 3 questions, a mini statement. I accept Councillor Patel's assertion. This isn't going to make money, and it's a genuine attempt to solve a problem. We have got a problem with those. And I hope Councillor Adzedi is right about Manchester and Bury being successful. But to my questions, I worry about section 7.2, based on a 10-hour a day. Now, bear in mind, the bulk of people in Trafford work. Is it reasonable, and has it been considered that actually with only 2 proper operating days, which represents 28% if it was booked out 10 hours a day on Saturday and Sunday? I think that is concerning. And then if it does fall below 40%, because we're losing money at 40%, who picks up the tab? Question 1. Question 2, we're dealing with 14 courts and committing pretty much all our money, the 250,000, 238,000. It leaves us with nothing to go forward. So if this fails, we've got no cash. But actually, if it's successful and we want to extend it, we've also got no cash. So burning our bridges as we step on to do this. And then finally, to allude back to the questioner, which really doesn't need an answer. We did a consultation, 80% didn't want it, yet we proceed. What's the point of the consultation? We could have saved a fortune and just got on with it. Don't need a response on that third one.
Okay, well, I'll start with your third one anyway, if you don't mind, if you'll indulge me in responding to that nevertheless. So I think 80% of the respondents to that responded to say that they didn't want to pay for tennis. But actually, this pilot proposal does contain the potential for there to still be some free tennis in those pilot sites. But given that we've currently only got 3 pilot sites, potentially, hopefully 4, there will still be all of the other tennis courts that are as is, that people will still be able to continue to access. So actually we have responded to the feedback that we had. I guess not responding to that feedback would look more to me like we just went ahead in every single site and did it anyway. So we have responded to that. The reason that we want to go ahead, I think, is really clearly articulated in the report, that we want to see how this will work, and we want to see if we can bring, something that has concessions that don't preclude anybody from playing tennis, and a free offer potentially of tennis still, possibly on a Saturday, so people can still access that. So that, I hope, does answer the question, that we have responded to the consultation, that some elements of it we accept people weren't happy with, and we wanted to be responsive to that. In terms of your question about the charging, that modelling there, I suppose, gives you, based on that, that's what you would be able to kind of to make. But we don't know, I suppose. We don't know what the uptake will be. It may be that, it may be more, it may not be as much as that, and I can't give you a guarantee. I'm not an expert in that. Looking at what's happened elsewhere, and some of the work that the LTA have done, we're hopeful that we'll be able to generate some of that. But I suppose in terms of the fact that we're putting some investment into this and we're getting the investment from the LTA, we will have courts that will be usable. They'll be fantastic. They will be good courts that people can use. Generating that income means that we can sustain it at that level, but it will still be there. It won't just disappear overnight if we don't make that, and hopefully we will make some that we are able to sustain that. I am also hoping that come the end of the pilot, we will have, I'm hoping that we will still have an option to potentially access some funding from the LTA at that point, so we can look at some of the other courts if that is something that they want to do. At the moment, we haven't had a brilliant response. Once people see it up and running, they see it, people accessing it, that might change. But all of those are ifs and buts, and I can't predict what will happen at that point. So I can't give you clarity on will we get that. I don't think our money in any event will be wasted, because it will bring those courts up to a really good standard. If there's one in each locality, then that means everybody should be able to get to one of those courts who wants to, which would be fabulous. So fingers crossed that that's the case. I don't know if I've missed one of your questions. Was there another question?
I think I was going to bring Richard in at this point.
Richard's probably got a better answer than mine. Yes, Richard.
Thank you, Councillor Lyons. Just to follow up on the first one in terms of the usage. So I think, as indicated, experience from Bury and Manchester's usage is around 50%. So that will get us to at least a break-even point. Part of our physical activity strategy, and this ties in with our physical activity strategy, is to get a broader range of people active. So it's also about young people, it's also about older people. So we're not necessarily just focusing on people in work here. So during those daytime hours, Monday to Friday, we would want the usage to be from a wider age range. And also recognising that at least 6 weeks of this is across the summer holidays as well. So we want to be maximising there. And I think also proportionally, whilst clearly we don't want to run at a loss, at a 40% figure, the amount that we're having to put in is less than £3,000 a year. So every penny counts, as we've all said very often around this table, but within the overall scale of the council budget, I think less than £3,000 a year, we can probably all agree, is marginal. On the second point on investment, yeah, you're right. In a way, we are putting our eggs in 14 baskets on these courts here, but that's about maximising the investment. So actually, by going down this route, we're getting £1 from the LTA for every £1 that we're putting in. So actually, we're doubling the benefit of the investment that we're putting in. That's part of the way that we're going down this route. And as Councillor Lyons said, the intention, if the pilot is successful and we can demonstrate that we'll be able to reach an expanded user base, we're increasing numbers, we would want then to be able to go back and talking to the other Friends of Parks groups to see if there was interest elsewhere, and talking to the LTA about potential future funding for future rounds of this. We can't guarantee it, so we've been very clear with those groups not part of the pilot that there's no guarantee of future investment, but we will be hopeful if we can demonstrate a successful scheme that the LTA would want to look to invest further, because it's certainly increasing participation of tennis more broadly is a key priority for the LTA.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Jerome.
Thank you, Chair. We were specifically told during the consultation that unless the council agreed to a 5-year contract model with the LTA, that this scheme could not practically go ahead. What has changed to allow a 2-year pilot operating model across 4 parks only? Many of the groups feel this goes against the spirit of our local parks, where access is free. Does the executive disagree with this position? Residents have also asked if park covenants, where they exist, had been fully addressed, and can they be made public, especially concerning John Lee Park? If monies are at the high end of expectation, could this be released to improve other courts beyond the scheme? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jerome. I'll go to Councillor Hines first.
Okay, so I'm going to defer to Richard actually in terms of what has changed from the 5-year to the 2-year, but I think the answer to that is that we've had a conversation with the LTA given the feedback that we've had, and that I do know that they are really, really keen to try to increase access to tennis, that we're not the only local authority that, is seeking to do this, and that I think they're really positive around, well, increasing access where you can is better than not doing that. So piloting it, I think, might be the reason why that's changed, but I will defer to Richard and ask him to come in shortly. In terms of does the executive not agree with that statement, I think it's kind of a binary question that actually, and I think it's a bit more complicated than that. I think I absolutely 100% agree with you that access to our parks should be free. Do I think that access to all of our services and all of our resources should always be free? Then evidently not, because we do sometimes have to charge for some of our services. We charge for our leisure services. There's lots of things that the council needs to charge for. I think what we're looking at here, though, is this is a way to maintain those courts. We are not able to invest into them. We absolutely can have those courts as they are, and I don't think anybody for 1 minute is suggesting that we start charging for the courts as they currently are. That would make no sense at all. So we're not suggesting that we're fundamentally changing something that people have already got. We want to offer something much, much better than that, and in order to do that, we need to find a way to resource it. When you look at the pricing for that, looking at £3 per court, that's £1.50 each, and if you're playing doubles, then that's half it again. So it's not a hugely significant amount that we're looking to charge, and it is less so than if you had to join a private tennis club. And as we were saying earlier, the idea is that you will have further concessions onto that. You'll have different pricing during different times of the week, and the potential for there to still be free tennis. You've still got all of the courts, as I said before, that we're not piloting this in. So I don't think that statement really is oh yes, we agree with that, or no we don't. I think it's more complex than that, and I think we've explained that there. And I am going to defer to Richard, I think, in terms of the covenant question, which I'm not too sure of the relevance of that to this paper, but there may be something that Richard can explain.
I know that's been raised. I thought we had released the covenants, to be honest, and if we haven't done, then I'll check, because I do know that question was asked by John Lee Part, so I thought we had done that, but I will double check. I don't think there's any reason why we wouldn't. We'd expect it to be on land registry records anyway, and publicly available therefore. And I think on the last point around while we may use funds, should we overachieve against our expected income requirements, I think that's probably something for the executive to consider in future, should that be the case, rather than something for us to answer that hypothetical question now. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Okay, so the recommendations are 1 to 3 as set out at the top of the paper. All those in favour?
Aye.
Great. So we move on to item 8, which is an update on the Council's Mayoral Challenge Fund active travel reprioritisation and the indicative 23-24 active travel scheme. Councillor Aidan Williams.
Thank you, Chair. And as you've just indicated, this report does intend to provide an update on the current position of the Council's efforts to improve active travel infrastructure in the borough. Section 1 of the report provides an overview of the original schemes that were explored or scoped for development. And you'll note that some schemes have progressed much further than others, with one component having been completed in full. Upon my taking responsibility for active travel last year, the project team have undertaken a reprioritisation exercise to determine the most effective way to arrange future works. This now places a greater emphasis on delivering a semi-permanent scheme through the remainder of Stretford, allowing the removal of the cones from the A56, with a view to installing a permanent scheme alongside the regeneration of Stretford town centre. What's not contained in the report, Chair, as it's hot off the press, is that the public consultation relating to the interim semi-permanent scheme in Stretford has been launched today. That consultation is going to run for the next 6 weeks, and I feel quite confident that this represents a positive next step on our journey to improving active travel. In addition to this, our next major focus will be the Urmston Active Neighbourhood. We're progressing with design work at present, and of course, those designs, when released, will generate a lot of questions from interested residents. So the intention is for a further consultation to be undertaken later in the year, around autumn time, as I explained in my answer to Mr. Gould's question earlier. Lastly, Chair, Section 3 of the report provides an outline of schemes explored that can potentially be brought forward in any future round of funding. The report is largely for noting, Chair, but does contain some recommended delegations to the Corporate Director Place and the Director of Legal and Governance, which I'm happy to move that committee support this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. And just to say, I completely agree with this approach to active travel. I know we've all said before how important it is to open up the options for people, whether they walk, whether they cycle, whether they use a wheelchair, whether they drive. We need to have those different options there to encourage more people to come out of their cars and use other forms of transport, including public transport as well. So I really welcome this. I really welcome the approach that's there. We're looking at around £13 million investment this next year, which I think is quite a significant amount of investment for the area, and very welcome as far as I'm concerned. Councillor Rad said.
Thank you, Leader, just briefly. Obviously, it's taken some time to get here, but I'm quite pleased that we've got this next round of the consultation on the A56, and it's and the publicity around that. I think it's important that local people do take the opportunity to actually get involved and engage with this. And I think that should be quite paramount, and hopefully we'll get some interesting and positive comments back on this. I know it's certainly a lot of discussion around this, and obviously what make it safe for all road users, you indicated there particularly. I think particular of interest to myself is obviously is actually the Talbot Road section, which has been ongoing for quite some time, and I'm quite pleased that particularly along the different sections starting where it joins where the roads separate at Talbot Road and Chester Road there. I think particularly I'm quite pleased there for the first time now as part of that scheme, when it does go ahead, which I'm sure it will, is particularly the extra pedestrian facility that's being put in there, which is what I insisted on a couple of years ago, because it's the one section that's missing where there's no safe crossing point for people to cross. That's a bit by Longford Road there. All the other sections are light controlled, and there's going to be gaps in traffic signals, I should say, where people can cross safely. Apart from this new facility extending that so that it will be safe periods that will be shown, that the one section that was missing was that section by Longford Road, which was actually bonkers really, where it's actually a busy road, and particularly in the morning peak and perhaps other potential peaks, where there was actually no time when pedestrians could actually cross safe there. I think it was really quite shocking it's taken us this long to actually get round to it. So I'm quite pleased that this facility is going to be for not just for cyclists, as some people suggest, but it'll be things like this will actually be included. And indeed, if you look further just up the road from here, there'll be pedestrians will actually be much safer crossing the road with these facilities as well. So I welcome all those there, but I think particularly we just need to get on with some sections of this. I think they've been around a long time. I think CFGM are actually, I think, really, it won't comment on it too much, but obviously we need to actually just get on with it now and get the spades in the ground and get the facilities up running to make these safer for pedestrians particularly, as well as cyclists. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Azad. Yes, I mean, we are very keen to work with our partners, Transport for Greater Manchester, on this, and we've developed a very good working relationship in recent months with you. And just saying what you said about Talbot Road, as a pedestrian who walked from the Town Hall down to Victoria Park Junior School earlier today, there were clear gaps in terms of being a pedestrian and safe crossing. So it is indeed very welcome. Councillor Slater.
I think the report's really welcome. I think that people in Stretford are really keen to have the work progressing onto the A56, and I think we'll all be aware of a very tragic accident that happened over the weekend where somebody was killed on the A56. So we need it to be as safe as possible. But what I did want to raise was actually this report will help with reducing our health inequalities, because the active cycling, walking and wheeling, they've got actually co-benefits for people, because public health are really keen to be involved in a lot of this work, especially around the air pollution. The active travel will bring that there will be lower emissions going into the roads, which will be safer for our younger people, our older people, our people who have breathing difficulties. Also, it will reduce that road danger, and also it will increase people's mobility. So, from a public health perspective, we really welcome the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Slater. Are there any other questions? Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just struggling on the figures. When you consider we've just discussed for quite a time 250,000 for spending on our tennis courts. Let's just talk about the Talbot Road one, which I presume is this one outside that goes up to Manchester. It costs 467. It looks like it costs 467,000 to develop, and it's going to cost probably 4.1 million to deliver. I think our residents will be shocked at those numbers. I appreciate this isn't actually our money, so it doesn't impact well, I suppose it does, because it comes out of the Mayor's precepts somewhere along the line. But they seem like eye-watering figures to deliver. I don't know what, I do know what, it's clear, but it seems very expensive. I'd love a breakdown from perhaps our accounts department about the Talbot Road, how we arrived at 4.75 million, please.
Okay, I will pass to Councillor Williams, first of all.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose I'd defer really to Corporate Director to place, Richard, in terms of whether we're able to provide a specific itemised breakdown. I mean, the costs that are included here will include design costs, contractor costs, so on and so forth. And obviously, we'd also have to include inflationary pressures in those. So it may be that they increase throughout the lifetime of the works. What I would say is active travel funding in this country, it's money that's allocated from central government in Westminster to local authorities to try and realise an active travel vision. So in Greater Manchester, the monies are pooled by the 10 local authorities, held by Transport for Greater Manchester, and then the 10 individual councils are in a position to bid for funding. So it wouldn't be a case of sort of precepts being accessed in that regard. I don't know if there's anything further you want to add, Richard.
Yeah, I'm sure we can provide a breakdown. I think if you just look at the Talbot Road, that covers 3 different junctions. There's a significant amount of work involved in those. It's not just painting white lines on the road. So they're looking at moving statutory undertakers, moving signals. They are civil engineering jobs, so they are expensive, but we can provide a breakdown across the schemes.
And I would add, really, if you've not been to see some of these junctions that have already been delivered in Greater Manchester, so Salford's done some of the cyclops junctions. They are significant engineering works. To get them done right and to a good spec, it is going to take quite a significant investment financially. Thank you, Chad.
I think I'd just add to that, and I think that was a very clear, very good answer. In terms of the value of it, if you're a student that goes to Stretford High School and you can't rely on the car or public transport, having a safe crossing is invaluable as far as I'm concerned, and having that in place, as we will do as part of this scheme, would be very welcome. Likewise, people accessing the leisure centre on Great Stone Road, we clearly want more people to be able to access not using the car, and having those safer processes, again, will play into the public health point, will be a win-win all round for us. So thank you for the questions, and I know that we'll get the separate information if we can to you. So Councillor Jerome.
Thank you, Chair. The amount of money we spend on active travel is minuscule compared to the road building programme that this government allocates, Councillor Evans. So we welcome this report with open arms, and are pleased that the money's being spent finally. Officers tell us beyond the current budgeted schemes that there is little strategic clarity as to how to meet the aims of the walking, wheeling and cycling strategy and deliver the joined up network that the GMB network requires. We know Trafford's congestion issues are primarily school run related. Should we be prioritising routes that enabled active travel to schools and ensure our spending achieves the maximum benefit for our local communities, however they travel? Also, noting the underspend of development funding and the strategy map in the report, Can the executive member ensure that sufficient network development work and engagement happens in this calendar year? And finally, with the Altrincham Bridge link, the bridge is being prioritised ahead of the Barrington Road junctions. In terms of need, this is totally the wrong way round.
Okay, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Councillor, for your question and also your feedback in respect to the works in Altrincham. I suppose I don't fully recognise the point you're saying about there being a lack of strategic vision. Certainly that's not feedback that I've been receiving from officers. I think a great deal of work has gone into trying to understand where we can deliver active travel improvements. And as I've said earlier in my introduction, into trying to prioritise those in a manner that makes the most sense. I'm just trying to think of the second. You fired a few at me then. What was your second question? Sorry. Small one. I think this is part of a package of work. So you'll know one of the things that we have been looking to do is try and roll out greater pace a project to School Street. So I think I wouldn't look at any single one in isolation, but certainly I take your point that school optimization is a huge priority. The vision for improving active travel is not about having state-of-the-art cycling facilities for extremely enthusiastic cyclists. It's about a school child being able to get safely from their home to their school if they want to use cycling as their preferred route or method. Richard, I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
I think I'd agree. I don't think we would accept there was a lack of strategic lack of strategic clarity. I think we've got a very clear walking, wheeling, and cycling strategy. I think what's set out in this paper is key delivery on that now along a key commuter route, which has been a long-held ambition. From us, it covers the first part of that from Stretford through to the edge of the city centre, and then linking into schemes being delivered in Manchester, signposting other schemes that connect into that. So we are thinking about the connectivity into the 56, and as Councillor Williams said, it's not about seeing this in isolation. So there's a separate work stream around school streets. We've got the pilots that have gone on this year. We're looking to roll out more of those. So very much thinking about that as well.
Okay, and I'd just add very briefly to that Councillor Williams and myself have worked very closely with our partners at Transport for Greater Manchester, with Dame Sarah Story over the last few months, and so we're very clear in our vision as this administration to, as was eloquently put by Councillor Williams, ensure that someone who's aged 8 can get to and from places safely, and that's something that we see as central to this, and I'm very excited by the investment that we're securing from Greater Manchester Combined Authority to deliver on some schemes. Councillor Ennis, you indicated as well.
Thank you, Chair. Walking, wheeling, cycling, all very welcome and laudable, and we welcome that. Speaking of Transport for Greater Manchester, are we any closer to hearing whether we are going to get, as part of this a piece in the jigsaw really, as the late night trams trial? Where are we on that?
At Greater Manchester B Network Committee on Thursday, so I will raise that for you, Councillor, and I'll get a response. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, everyone. So the recommendations are A to H as set out in the report. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you very much. So now we move on to the Period 2 Budget Monitoring Report, and I'm going to hand over to Councillor Jo Harding, the Exec Member for Finance, Change and Governance.
Thank you, Leader. I am presenting this report, Budget Monitoring Period 2. I do hope that all members are continuing to find the layout of the report and the presentation of the report a lot better than previous reports. I certainly find it easy to read, easy to digest, and easy to pick up on some of the points. So the part 1 at a glance, part 2 some of the narrative, and part 3 containing all the annexes. So thank you again to officers for continuing to provide the financial information in I will say easy to read as local government finance can possibly be. Period 2, we're obviously at the early stages of budget monitoring, and it's important that we keep our eye on things as we progress throughout the year. What I would say, and it's interesting actually, some of the conversations we've had about investment and tennis and what local government looks like, just to members' attention to page 15, Outlook and Summary, which mentions that we continue to observe a cautious approach as to how we plan the budget and we maintain the budget. We do have contingencies for the demand-led budgets, which are released throughout the course of the year. We have the investment strategy, which again, if we're looking at things like the economic situation at the minute, we proceed with risk, but we do know that local government clearly has to look to generate its own income. So I'm presenting this report for members to note. Note that there is an overspend of 1.299, and clearly if you look at the areas where it's all RAG rated, we look at things like those demand-led budgets like children's placements, home to school transports, the dedicated school grants, all of those areas that we know we have to keep a watching brief on, but please be assured that work is taking place in the Finance and Change Board in relation to how we can look to do things differently to make sure we provide the best outcomes for our young people and adults who use our demand-led budgets. So with that, Leader, I will table the report for noting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harding. Has anyone got any questions or comments from the executive? Okay. Any wider? Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. First one is just there's now a grant allocation, public health grant allocation, 430,000. Was that from the Greater Manchester NHS budget, or is that from the government grant?
Yeah, it's government, and we always tend to get late allocation of public health grant, which makes it quite difficult for us then to plan and allocate. But yes, that's government funding.
I see, because the thing is, there was actually a saving of 36,000 on that from the budget, and that on table 1 it shows that you've made a saving, but you've still been allocated the grant. Though, was that because it came in late or something, or was that? Yeah.
Exactly that, Councillor, but as I said, really, the public health funding is allocated to us from government, and you will know that public health funding as well tends to be ring-fenced for certain statutory requirements that the council has to do. We have flexibility around certain things, but certainly public health around things like smoking cessation, sexual health, all of that is ring-fenced for us to make sure that the council provides those statutory services.
Okay, and the second question was, if I may, clearly, it's quite costly to put children into external residential care. You know, there are 9 children costing £2 million, I suppose, just under £250,000 a piece, in a way. And there's no absolute situation where you could bring them in-house. I mean, for example, I'm just thinking, I just passed on my way in today. There was a house on A56, which is an ex-council house, a large one in a substantial, near to the Altrincham Fire Station, in fact, just further up from there, opposite. And it's being sold by Salford City Council for some bizarre reason. Those kind of properties which could perhaps be exchanged or taken on and brought up to some kind of standard where you could accommodate some of those children. I'm just wondering whether that's a possibility. Thank you.
I will just,
sorry, I was going to say thank you, Councillor, but I am going to bring in Jill in a minute to respond to some of that. But what I would say, Councillor Butt, is this really, that it isn't sometimes just about the building. You know, there may be empty estate, which we could look to say, okay, that would work perfectly to place some of our children. I think what we have to look at is the skills that would be required to offer the support for some very complex children, whether it's the right thing to place some of those children in borough, depending on the requirements that those young people have. It's a complex picture, and obviously as part of Greater Manchester we will have a devolved health and social care budget, and some of those conversations are taking place, but I will defer to Jill to answer in more detail.
Thank you, Councillor Harding and Councillor Buss. What I can advise the executive and members this evening is that we are actively and constantly looking at which children we can place within local provision. You will have seen within the report that there is a programme and a savings target in relation to what we call step-down placements, and that's exactly the sort of thing that you're talking about, Councillor Buss. Which children can we safely return to care placements within the borough? As Councillor Harding has already said, it's not just a question of having the property, it is a question of having wraparound services, having skills and expertise, the workforce, and not least for any care provision, it needs to be registered with the relevant regulatory bodies. What I can say is, as part of the Finance and Change programme, we are looking at whether it would be financially viable for us to actually develop any in-borough provision.
Thank you very much, Jill. Thank you, Councillor Harding. There are no other questions, so this is an item for noting. Consider it noted. If we move on now to the next agenda item, which is the, well, coming towards the end of the meeting now, which is the corporate plan for 2022-23. I'm presenting this report tonight. The annual report, which is enclosed in the item, provides highlights from April 2022 through to March this year. There's also some very interesting case studies within the in the annual report as well. So some of the highlights that are mentioned are the improvement in our children's services, the Poverty Truth Commission work that's taken place, our real living wage accreditation at the borough, the launch of the walking, wheeling and cycling strategy has been referred to already, and the moving strategy. £20 million successful levelling up bid for Partington Leisure Centre. Work underway at Altrincham Leisure Centre with very mindful of the of being as carbon neutral as possible there, looking at environmentally friendly build and sustainable buildings there. We have provided support through our hubs, through the Welfare Rights Service, through putting out the household support funding to people most in need. We've also signed up to the Good Landlord Scheme. We're working closely with our partners around Trafford Green Hydrogen and also the Net Zero Trafford Park feasibility study. And work is underway in Stretford, and we've also got some recent public realm work to celebrate in Altrincham. So that's just a snapshot of some of the things that have been achieved in the borough, and we'd be nothing without the officers that work for this borough and provide services day in, day out in very testing circumstances, both financially and time-wise. So, you know, I want to put my heartfelt appreciation on record for all the officers of this council, because they really do help deliver for us in Trafford and make it a great place to live. I don't know if any members of the executive wish to contribute. I'll go to Councillor Patel first.
Thank you, Leader. Just to remark on the Poverty Truth Commission, I was a civic commissioner in that process, and just wanted to thank again, as we have done publicly, I know the community commissioners and the other civic commissioners that were involved in that really engaging and interesting and challenging piece of work. The looking forward to the next 12 months, the key is to get a meaningful legacy from that piece of work, which I know that we're all working hard to do. And if I may, just a shout out to the Sale West Hub and to Salemore Community Partnership, who they work very closely with, for the wonderful support that they offer to families across Sale. Couldn't do without them. And very pleased to see the Holiday Activity Fund up and running again this summer. I know that that's been really popular in my ward. And just the Heritage Lottery bid submission on Longford Park. So that's one of our already most popular parks, will become, I think, a regionally significant park when we get that up and running. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I did just briefly want to comment on the performance monitoring of the climate change work undertaken by the authority. As I think it's fair to say really that the RAG rating shows that we've had some successes, but also some challenges, as we can see in the appendices to the report. I'm pleased, for instance, that Trafford is once again performing strongly in respect of recycling. There's room for improvement, but it's very welcome indeed that, as I understand it, we're once again on top as the best performing borough in Greater Manchester. However, there are also some areas of concern that I think it's right for us to acknowledge, such as our emissions performance. The other reflection I'd make, Chair, is that I do question whether some of the performance indicators might benefit from reconsideration over the course of the next year. And I say that only because I'm not entirely sure of the benefit of us monitoring electric vehicle ownership privately amongst residents, as I question how much we can influence that directly as a local authority. Additionally, I also think that there is some good work that the authority's undertaking that perhaps isn't being reflected in the KPIs. I think they're about the decarbonisation work that the One Trafford Partnership is cracking on with. What I would add, though, Chair, is that we have significantly increased our own internal resourcing of this service area. I'm really pleased that we've now recruited a head of climate change and sustainability who will be joining us in September. Ensuring that we're monitoring our work in respect of addressing the climate crisis as effectively as possible will be something that they explore. So thank you for that opportunity, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. And rightly, you point out the appendix where there is some RAG rating. Clearly, it's important we continue to target ourselves and understand where we haven't achieved the targets for the year. And I think you've alluded on some of those areas, and hopefully with that extra resource, we can work even more to bridging those gaps. Councillor Slater.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to point out some of the stuff that we've done around health inequalities. I think that we're working really hard to get some changes for our residents in Trafford, because I think if you look in the report, you'll see that there's an actually 16-year life expectancy between our poorest areas and our more affluent areas, and that is something that we need to address as soon as possible. I think that some of the stuff that we're doing around smoking cessation is going to be really, really beneficial work. Also, we're looking at vaping. We're looking at vaping as an alternative to smoking, but we're going to look at work now to try and encourage people not to take up vaping if they hadn't been smoking previously. So there's a big piece of work that's planned and is underway. We've started the Trafford Tobacco Alliance, and we've got lots of partners who are involved in that. We've got the Trafford Leisure, we've got lots of other, can't even think off the top of my head, sorry. We've got Trafford Leisure and others who want to be involved in that and to deliver for us, which is really, really important that we encourage our young people not to take up vaping. And we did a piece of work as well around our older residents just recently, because they hadn't taken up pension credits, and that has been really successful. There was millions of pounds that our residents hadn't taken up in pension credits, and that is now that has been now claimed by our residents. So actually that money is in their pockets, and so hopefully that will prevent some of those inequalities. But the work that we're doing around health, the work that we're doing around our older adult services, I shouldn't say older, adult services, and around our public health, we should be singing it from the rooftops. We're doing really, really good work. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Slater. And Councillor Hines.
Thank you, Leader. And just nicely, really following on from Councillor Slater's comments, I just wanted to really reflect on the very, very positive activity that's taking place around the physical activities agenda. I think there's some real innovation that's happening there, and that is not just going to the gym. That's all types of physical activity across all ages and abilities. I think the position of Trafford Leisure is incredibly positive, actually, and reflects our objectives. And that is not necessarily a picture that's replicated everywhere in every local authority. And I think that is thanks to some of the innovations that are taking place. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Hines. Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I welcome the new format. It is so much easier to read than the one we had before. 2 points, because it's a massive report, but only two. One, that's page 159, Key Stage 2 has dropped by 10%, which is 4% worse than the rest of the country. That's quite concerning, as we are a centre of excellence for education. Is there anything the borough can do, anything Trafford can do to improve that, and what are we doing? And then secondly, percentage of made of planning applications process looks good. I received many complaints from residents with small planning applications. Is that in here, and have I missed it? And could we add it for next time? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Evans. I'm going to go to Jill for the first question.
So in terms of our Key Stage 2 results, we got the first cut of them last week in terms of what the current performance looks like. And for the majority of pupils in Trafford, we are doing incredibly well. But linked to the earlier comments about health inequalities for some of our more disadvantaged pupils, that's an area that we do need to target. our analysis would show there aren't any significant patterns and trends. So we're having to look at the real detail to develop and enhance our strategies, but we'll bring some detail back around that.
On the second, we can certainly consider that in terms of measures. Oh, Richard.
So performance on householder applications, so that's the minor applications. We know that has been a challenge for us. The number of minor applications that we got increased significantly during the COVID period. We expected it to slow down a bit post-COVID, but it hasn't done. That does put a huge amount of pressure. They're often very complex, even though small. They're often quite complex and quite challenging and quite time-consuming. We have had a big push recently to improve performance. We have caught up with the backlog. So I can provide you with some up-to-date performance information for last year. I think whether we include it in the corporate performance plan for next year, we can feed that into the discussion when we look at what our KPIs are for next year, because they've not been agreed as yet.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Butt, did you indicate? Yeah.
Yeah, it was just on the page 1.9, it was reducing health inequalities. There is a chapter on obesity there. And I know there seems to be a persistent sort of obesity level amongst young people, 1 in 4, particularly amongst the most disadvantaged communities within the borough. And it is a difficult one, and it's a slow progress one in terms of getting it. But I think it does highlights not to reduce any kind of sporting facilities wherever possible, and maintain those facilities if we can as to what possible. Thanks.
Certainly, you're right to pick up on that, Councillor, but it is one that needs focus, and it will be getting focus. Don't know if you want to say anything, Councillor Slater.
Well, just to say, obviously, it is a concern around obesity, but when you think about our people in our most disadvantaged areas that are having to use food banks, the standard of food that they are able to achieve isn't the same as if you were living and able to go to the Barbican and the Unicorn every day, is it? So, the choice for some parents is to make sure that their children aren't hungry going to bed at night. And I think that's one of the issues that we need to be looking at about equality going forward. I think that some of the food vouchers that we've got in for schools for the school holidays and stuff like that, that will help for children to be able to have the same sort of level of food that they've been receiving in school. But just be mindful that we do have a massive proportion of our residents across Trafford who use food banks, and what's on offer is pretty much beans and bread or beans and bread.
Thank you, Councillor Slater. Okay, this was an item for noting, and thank you for your comments about the format, Councillor Evans. It's much appreciated. So I think we can consider that noted. I don't have any urgent business, and I don't for once need to move the exclusion resolution, which is always a joy. So before I close this meeting, I hope that Stretford WI have found that interesting, and if you've got some time to spare, I can do a tour of the town hall with you now. So, but with that, good evening, everyone, and we'll see you again soon.